I never thought I'd be sitting in my own granddaughter's baby shower feeling like an unwelcome stranger, but here I am, surrounded by the soft pastels and delicate decorations I paid for, listening to whispers that cut deeper than any blade ever could. My name is Dorothy Williams, and at 68 years old, I've weathered enough storms to recognize when another one is brewing around me. The community center in Oakville looks beautiful today. I'll give them that. The October afternoon light filters through the tall windows, casting a golden glow over the cream and sage green decorations that cost me nearly $3,000. White roses cascade from elegant centerpieces, their fragrance mixing with the crisp autumn air that carries the promise of an early Canadian winter. Outside, the maple trees are dressed in their finest reds and golds, a reminder of the country I've called home for 43 years, ever since I immigrated from Jamaica with nothing but hope and determination. This place holds significance for me beyond today's celebration. It's where I used to bring my daughter Michelle to community events when she was small, back when we were one of only a handful of black families in this predominantly white suburb. I'd watch her play with the other children, my heart swelling with pride and breaking with worry in equal measure, knowing she'd face challenges I could shield her from at home, but not in the wider world. Now Michelle's daughter, my precious Chloe, is expecting her first child, and I should be overflowing with joy. Instead, I'm sitting at a table near the back of the room, not by choice, but because it's where I was directed when I arrived, watching a celebration I made possible while feeling increasingly invisible with each passing moment. I worked 2 jobs for 30 years to build the life my family enjoys today. While other women my age were settling into comfortable retirements, I was cleaning office buildings at night and working as a home health aide during the day, saving every penny I could for my family's future. My hands still bear the calluses from those years of scrubbing floors and lifting patients. My back still aches from the countless hours bent over hospital beds and office desks, all so that Michelle could go to university without debt, and Chloe could grow up with opportunities I never dreamed of. When Chloe called me 6 weeks ago, her voice bright with excitement about planning the perfect baby shower, I didn't hesitate to offer my help. "Grandma Dot," she said, using the nickname that always made my heart melt. "I found this amazing venue, but it's a bit expensive. Do you think?" Of course I said yes. I always say yes when it comes to my family. I wrote the check for the venue rental, the catering, the decorations, even the photographer who's currently capturing memories I'm barely included in. It was worth it to hear the joy in Chloe's voice, to know that her special day would be everything she dreamed of. But sitting here now, watching the other guests, mostly Chloe's in-laws and their friends, cluster together in animated conversation while barely acknowledging my presence, I'm beginning to understand that my financial contributions don't translate to social acceptance. The looks I've been receiving since I arrived aren't the warm, welcoming glances you'd expect at a family celebration. There's something else entirely. Assessing, questioning, uncomfortable. Something's shifting in the atmosphere around me, and I can feel it building like the pressure before a thunderstorm. The way conversations quiet when I approach, the way eyes follow me as I move through the room, the way certain people seem to be having discussions about me rather than with me. There's a reckoning coming, and I have the sinking feeling that I'm about to discover just how welcome I really am at this party I paid for. The assault on my dignity came during the gift opening ceremony, when I should have been basking in the joy of watching my granddaughter celebrate her upcoming motherhood. Instead, I found myself the unwitting subject of a conversation that would haunt me for weeks to come. I had excused myself to use the restroom, my arthritis making the walk down the hallway slower than I would have liked. The community center's washrooms were located past a small alcove where some of the younger women had gathered, presumably for a private chat away from the main celebration. I wouldn't have paid them any attention, but my name caught my ear as I approached. "I just don't understand why Dorothy had to be here," one voice said. I recognized it as belonging to Amanda, Chloe's sister-in-law. "I mean, I get that she's family, but this is supposed to be an elegant affair. She just doesn't fit the aesthetic we were going for." My feet stopped moving. The words hit me like a physical blow, each syllable landing with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel, cutting through decades of carefully constructed confidence. "She seems nice enough," another voice offered weakly. Sarah, one of Chloe's college friends. "But you're right, she does stand out. Maybe if she'd dressed differently." "It's not just the clothes," Amanda continued, her voice dropping to what she probably thought was a whisper, but carried clearly in the tiled hallway. "It's everything. The way she talks, the way she carries herself. She doesn't belong here, and everyone can see it. I just hope she doesn't embarrass Chloe in front of the photographer. Doesn't belong here." The words echoed in my mind as I stood frozen in that hallway, my hand gripping my purse so tightly my knuckles went white. I looked down at my outfit, a navy blue dress I'd bought specifically for this occasion at Hudson's Bay, paired with the pearl necklace my late husband had given me for our 20th anniversary. I'd thought I looked appropriate, dignified, worthy of the celebration. But apparently, I was wrong. The third voice in the group belonged to someone I didn't recognize, probably one of the in-laws' friends. Well, at least she's sitting in the back. And honestly, how much could she have contributed anyway? These community center events aren't exactly expensive. If only they knew. If only they understood that the inexpensive community center event they were dismissing had cost me 3 months of my pension, that the elegant decorations they were admiring had been chosen and paid for by the woman they were discussing like an unwelcome intruder. I forced myself to continue walking, my legs feeling unsteady as I made my way to the restroom. Inside, I stared at my reflection in the mirror, seeing myself through their eyes for the first time. My dark skin, which had weathered decades of hard work and sacrifice, my graying hair, styled simply because I couldn't afford the expensive salon treatments the other women probably took for granted. My dress, nice but not designer, appropriate but not fashionable. For 43 years, I'd lived in this country, raised my daughter here, built a life here. I'd paid my taxes, volunteered in my community, contributed to the fabric of Canadian society in ways both large and small. But in that moment, listening to those women discuss my unworthiness to attend my own granddaughter's baby shower, I felt like the outsider I'd apparently always been in their eyes. When I returned to the main room, everything looked different. The decorations I'd paid for seemed to mock me. The other guests' polite smiles felt forced and hollow. Even Chloe, my beloved granddaughter, seemed distant as she continued opening gifts, surrounded by women who clearly saw me as an embarrassment to be tolerated rather than a grandmother to be celebrated. I took my seat at the back table, my hands trembling slightly as I reached for my water glass. The photographer moved through the room, capturing candid moments of joy and celebration, but his lens seemed to avoid my corner of the room. I was being erased from my own granddaughter's memories, relegated to the shadows of an event I'd made possible. But as I sat there, feeling smaller and more invisible than I had in decades, something else began to stir inside me. It was a familiar feeling, one I'd experienced many times during my years as an immigrant, a single mother, a woman fighting for respect in a world that often seemed determined to deny it to me. They had awakened something they weren't prepared to handle. They had forgotten that the woman they were dismissing had survived poverty, discrimination, and loss while building a better life for her family. They had no idea what they'd just unleashed. What would you do in my place? Hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments, because trust me, they have no idea what's coming next. The remainder of the gift opening ceremony passed in a blur of forced smiles and burning shame that seemed to radiate from my chest outward, coloring every interaction with the bitter taste of humiliation. I watched from my corner table as Chloe unwrapped present after present, each gift accompanied by squeals of delight and warm embraces from the women who had deemed me unworthy of their acceptance. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was watching my granddaughter celebrate with gifts I'd helped make possible, not just through paying for the shower, but through years of supporting Chloe's education, her wedding, her first apartment, the beautiful nursery furniture that had arrived yesterday. I'd contributed half the cost. The expensive stroller system that had Chloe nearly in tears with gratitude, that was my early Christmas gift to her. But none of that seemed to matter to the women who continued to treat me like an unwelcome guest at my own family's celebration. After the gifts were opened and the photographer had captured what felt like hundreds of pictures that somehow never seemed to include me, I found myself alone at my table while the other guests mingled around the dessert station. The 3-tiered cake, vanilla with raspberry filling, Chloe's favorite, stood as a centerpiece of elegance that I'd special ordered from the best bakery in Oakville. Yet as I watched the other women sample the delicate petit fours and macarons, I felt like I was observing the celebration through glass, present but not truly included. My phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, asking how the shower was going. I stared at the message for a long moment, my thumb hovering over the keyboard as I considered how to respond. Finally, I typed back, "It's been enlightening." That single word seemed to capture everything I was feeling. Enlightening. I was learning exactly where I stood in this family's social hierarchy, exactly how my contributions were valued when weighed against my perceived social inadequacy, exactly what these people thought of the woman who had sacrificed so much to ensure their comfort and happiness. I excused myself again, this time stepping outside onto the community center's small patio, where the October air carried the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of winter. The maple trees that lined the parking lot were at their peak autumn glory, their red and gold leaves creating a canopy of natural beauty that reminded me why I'd fallen in love with Canada all those years ago. Standing there in the crisp air, I allowed myself to remember the young woman I'd been when I first arrived in Toronto in 1982. 25 years old, carrying a suitcase and a heart full of dreams, determined to build a better life for myself and the daughter I was raising alone. I'd faced discrimination then too, in job interviews where my accent was deemed unprofessional, in apartment viewings where I was suddenly told the unit was no longer available, in countless small interactions where I was made to feel like I didn't belong. But I'd persevered. I'd worked harder than anyone else, saved more diligently, sacrificed more completely. I'd put Michelle through university, helped her buy her first house, supported her through her divorce. When she remarried and moved to this affluent suburb, I'd been so proud, so happy that she'd found love and security. And when Chloe was born, I'd thrown myself into being the best grandmother I could be. I'd babysat countless nights so Michelle and her husband could have date nights. I'd attended every school play, every soccer game, every milestone celebration. I'd been there for chicken pox and broken hearts, for first days of school and graduation ceremonies. But apparently, none of that history mattered when it came to fitting into the social circles my family now moved in. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my banking app, looking at the transaction from 6 weeks ago. $2,147.50. Oakville Community Center. Williams baby shower. Below that were dozens of other transactions over the years. Tuition payments, down payment assistance, emergency loans, birthday gifts, Christmas presents, vacation contributions. A paper trail of love that told the real story of who had made their comfortable lives possible. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were steady, purposeful, filled with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. When I returned to the party, the atmosphere had shifted slightly. Some guests were beginning to gather their purses and jackets, the celebration winding down as the afternoon grew later. Chloe was surrounded by her closest friends, laughing at some shared joke, her face glowing with the happiness that pregnancy and anticipation can bring. She looked so much like Michelle had at that age. The same bright smile, the same animated gestures, the same unconscious confidence that comes from never having to question whether you belong somewhere. It was a confidence I'd worked my entire life to give her, even if it meant I'd never quite achieved it for myself. But as I watched her, something crystallized in my mind. A decision that had been building since I'd overheard those cruel words in the hallway, since I'd felt the weight of dismissive glances and polite exclusion, since I'd realized that my love and sacrifice had earned me tolerance rather than respect. They wanted to question whether I belonged here? Fine. But they were about to learn exactly who had made this celebration, and so many others, possible in the first place. The decision came to me with startling clarity as I watched the party begin to wind down, guests starting to collect their gift bags and say their goodbyes. I had spent the entire afternoon being treated like an afterthought at an event I'd paid for, surrounded by people who questioned my right to be there while enjoying the hospitality my money had provided. But I wasn't ready to slink away quietly, to let this moment pass without consequence. I approached Chloe, who was still surrounded by her inner circle of friends and in-laws, all of them glowing with the satisfaction of a successful celebration. When she saw me coming, her face lit up with genuine warmth, the first truly welcoming expression I'd received all afternoon. "Grandma Dot," she exclaimed, reaching out to embrace me. "Isn't this just perfect? I can't believe how beautiful everything turned out. The decorations, the food, Even the weather cooperated. "It is beautiful, sweetheart," I agreed, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. "I'm so happy you're pleased with how everything came together." Amanda, who had been standing beside Chloe, shifted uncomfortably at my approach. I could see the recognition in her eyes. She knew I'd overheard her earlier comments, and the guilt was written across her face like a confession. But instead of apologizing or attempting to make amends, she simply took a step back, as if my presence might somehow contaminate the perfection of the moment. "Chloe, honey," I said, my hand resting gently on my granddaughter's arm, "I was wondering if I might say a few words to everyone before they leave. You know how much this day means to me, and I'd love to share some thoughts about the baby and your future." Chloe's eyes sparkled with delight. "Of course, Grandma. Everyone would love to hear from you. You always give the most beautiful speeches." She turned to address the remaining guests, her voice carrying easily across the room. "Everyone, could I have your attention for just a moment? My grandmother would like to say a few words." The conversations gradually died down as faces turned toward me with varying degrees of interest and politeness. I could see Amanda whispering something urgent to one of her friends, probably warning them about what might be coming. Sarah, the college friend who had participated in the hallway conversation, was studying her phone with sudden intensity, as if she could disappear into its screen. But I wasn't looking at them anymore. I was looking at the room I'd paid to rent, decorated with flowers I'd chosen and purchased, filled with food I'd ordered and paid for, hosting a celebration for the granddaughter I'd helped raise and support. This was my moment, my space, my family, and it was time everyone understood exactly what that meant. "Thank you all so much for being here today," I began, my voice carrying the authority that comes from 7 decades of hard-earned wisdom. "It means the world to Chloe and to our entire family to have you share in this special celebration." I paused, letting my eyes sweep across the faces of people who had spent the afternoon treating me like an unwelcome intruder. The irony of the moment wasn't lost on me. They were about to learn exactly who the intruder really was. "You know," I continued, my tone conversational but carrying an undercurrent of something sharper, "when Chloe first told me about her dream baby shower, I was so excited to help make it happen. She had such specific ideas about what she wanted. This beautiful venue, these elegant decorations, the perfect cake, professional photography to capture every precious moment." Some guests were beginning to look puzzled, unsure where this speech was heading. Others, particularly those who had participated in the earlier conversation, were starting to look distinctly uncomfortable. And I have to say, seeing it all come together exactly as she envisioned has been one of the greatest joys of my life. Every detail is perfect, from the cream and sage color scheme to the white roses, from the 3-tiered cake to the professional photographer who's been capturing such beautiful memories all afternoon. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone, the banking app still open to the transaction history I'd been reviewing earlier. It's amazing what love can accomplish when you're willing to invest in the people who matter most to you. The room had grown completely quiet now, the weight of anticipation settling over the guests like a blanket. Chloe was looking at me with curiosity and growing concern, sensing that something significant was about to happen, but not understanding what. "I think it's time everyone knew exactly how much this celebration means to our family," I said, my voice growing stronger with each word, "and exactly who made it possible." The storm I'd been holding back all afternoon was finally ready to break, and everyone in that room was about to get soaked. What would you do in my place? Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because what happens next will change everything at this baby shower. The silence in the room was so complete, I could hear the October wind rustling the maple leaves outside the tall windows. Every guest was focused on me now, their conversations forgotten, their polite smiles frozen in place as they sensed something momentous was about to unfold. I stood there, feeling more powerful than I had in months, holding my phone with its damning evidence of financial transactions that told the real story of this celebration. $3,473, I said clearly, my voice carrying to every corner of the room. That's what this beautiful baby shower cost, from the venue rental to the last petit four on that dessert table. I could see confusion rippling through the crowd, guests glancing at each other uncertainly. Chloe's face had gone pale, her hand instinctively moving to rest on her growing belly as if to protect her unborn child from whatever was coming. The venue rental was $800, I continued, consulting my phone with the precision of an accountant presenting evidence. The catering package was $1,200. The floral arrangements, those beautiful white roses everyone's been admiring, were $450. The three-tiered cake from Oakville's finest bakery was $325. Amanda had gone completely white, her earlier confidence evaporating as she realized where this was heading. Sarah was no longer pretending to look at her phone. She was staring at me with the horrified fascination of someone watching a car accident unfold in slow motion. The professional photographer who's been capturing all these precious memories? That was another $600. The elegant decorations, the gift bags, the premium linens, every single detail that made this day special for Chloe. All of it was carefully chosen and paid for by someone who loves her more than life itself. I looked directly at Amanda now, my gaze steady and unflinching. Someone who apparently doesn't belong here and doesn't fit the aesthetic you were hoping for. The gasp that went through the room was audible. Several guests looked shocked, others embarrassed, and a few were beginning to piece together what had happened. Chloe's eyes filled with tears as understanding dawned on her face. "Grandma," she whispered, her voice breaking. "What are you talking about? Who said that to you?" But I wasn't finished. The floodgates had opened, and 43 years of accumulated frustration, discrimination, and quiet dignity were pouring out in a torrent that couldn't be stopped. You see, everyone, I've been living in Canada for over 4 decades. I came here from Jamaica with nothing but hope and determination, and I've spent every day since then working to build a better life for my family. I've cleaned office buildings at night and cared for the elderly during the day. I've saved every penny I could, sacrificed every luxury, denied myself every comfort so that my daughter and granddaughter could have opportunities I never dreamed of. My voice was growing stronger, more confident with each word. I put Michelle through university. I helped her buy her first house. I supported her through her divorce and celebrated with her when she found love again. When Chloe was born, I became not just a grandmother, but a second mother, babysitting, supporting, loving unconditionally. I could see some guests beginning to look ashamed, their earlier dismissal of me taking on a different meaning in light of these revelations. But I wasn't seeking their pity. I was demanding their respect. And when my granddaughter called me 6 weeks ago, so excited about planning the perfect baby shower but worried about the cost, I didn't hesitate for a single moment. I wrote the check that made this day possible because that's what grandmothers do. We sacrifice for the people we love. Chloe was crying openly now, her hands pressed to her face as the full weight of what had happened began to sink in. "Grandma, I'm so sorry. I had no idea anyone said those things to you. I would never—" "I know you wouldn't, sweetheart," I said gently, my tone softening as I looked at her. "You have a beautiful heart, just like your mother. But some of your guests seem to have forgotten that respect isn't determined by the color of your skin or the accent in your voice. It's earned through your actions, your character, and your contributions to the people you love." The room was so quiet, you could have heard a pin drop. Amanda was staring at the floor, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Sarah had tears streaming down her face, whether from shame or genuine remorse, I couldn't tell. "So yes," I concluded, my voice ringing with quiet authority, "I absolutely belong here. Not because I paid for everything, but because I'm family. Because I love Chloe and her baby with every fiber of my being. Because I've earned my place at this table through decades of sacrifice and unconditional love." I looked around the room one final time, meeting the eyes of every person who had made me feel unwelcome in my own granddaughter's celebration. And if anyone has a problem with that, they're welcome to leave, but they should probably return their gift bags on the way out, since apparently they have such strong opinions about who deserves to benefit from my generosity. The reckoning I'd been building toward all afternoon had finally arrived, and everyone in that room was about to learn exactly what happens when you underestimate a woman who spent a lifetime fighting for respect. The silence that followed my revelation was deafening. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the gentle hum of the air conditioning and the distant laughter of children playing in the park outside. Then, slowly, the weight of what I'd said began to settle over the guests like a heavy blanket of shame and realization. Amanda was the first to crack. Her carefully composed facade crumbled as she stepped forward, her voice shaking with what I hoped was genuine remorse. "Mrs. Williams, I am so deeply sorry. What I said was inexcusable, and "You're right," I interrupted, my voice calm but firm. It was inexcusable, but more than that, it was revealing. It showed me exactly what you think of the woman who made this celebration possible, who has been part of this family longer than you have, who has contributed more to Chloe's happiness and security than you'll probably ever know. I turned to address the entire room, my phone still in my hand displaying the evidence of my financial contribution. You see, everyone, this isn't just about money. It's about respect, recognition, and basic human decency. For 43 years, I've been building a life in this country, contributing to this community, raising a family that has become successful and respected members of Canadian society. Chloe had moved closer to me, her tears flowing freely as she reached for my hand. Grandma Dot, please forgive them. Please forgive me for not protecting you from this. I should have noticed, should have said something. You have nothing to apologize for, sweetheart, I said, squeezing her hand gently. You've always treated me with love and respect, but some of your guests seem to have forgotten that family isn't defined by how much money you have, or how perfectly you fit into someone else's idea of what's appropriate. I looked directly at the photographer who had been standing frozen with his camera, unsure whether to continue documenting what was clearly becoming a very different kind of celebration than he'd been hired to capture. Are you still recording? I asked him. He nodded nervously. Yes, ma'am. Should I stop? No, I said firmly. Keep recording. I want this moment preserved. I want my great-grandchild to know exactly what kind of woman their great-grandmother was, and exactly what she was willing to do to defend her family's dignity. I turned back to the assembled guests, many of whom were now looking anywhere but at me, their discomfort palpable. You know what the real tragedy is? You've spent this entire afternoon judging me, questioning whether I belong here, whispering about how I don't fit your aesthetic, but you've missed the most important thing of all. I paused, letting the tension build as I prepared to deliver the blow that would change everything. You've missed the fact that I'm not just Chloe's grandmother. I'm not just the woman who paid for this party. I'm also the woman who has been quietly supporting this entire family for decades, and I'm the woman who just updated her will last month. The room went completely still. I could see the blood draining from several faces as the implications of what I'd just said began to sink in. You see, I've been very fortunate in my investments over the years. That little house I bought in Mississauga in 1985 for $60,000, it's worth over $1 million now. The pension I've been carefully managing, it's grown substantially. The life insurance policy I've maintained, well, let's just say it's quite generous. I could see Amanda's face cycling through a range of emotions, shock, fear, and what looked like dawning horror as she realized the magnitude of her mistake. And I've been planning to leave everything to my family, of course, to the people who love me, respect me, and treat me like I belong in their lives. But after today, I let the sentence hang in the air, like a sword waiting to fall. After today, I'm thinking I might need to reconsider who really deserves to benefit from a lifetime of hard work and sacrifice. The justice I'd been building toward all afternoon was finally being served, and it was more satisfying than I'd ever imagined it could be. What would you do in my place? Subscribe, and let me know in the comments, because this story is far from over. The aftermath of my revelation was immediate and dramatic. Amanda looked like she might faint, her face cycling between pale and flushed as the full implications of what I'd said sank in. Several other guests who had participated in the earlier whispered conversations were now staring at me with expressions ranging from horror to desperate calculation. But it was Chloe's reaction that mattered most to me. My granddaughter was still holding my hand, her tears flowing freely as she processed everything that had happened. "Grandma," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm so ashamed. I invited these people into our family celebration, and they treated you like I didn't belong," I finished gently. "But that says nothing about me, sweetheart, and everything about them." Sarah, the college friend who had participated in the hallway conversation, suddenly stepped forward, her face streaked with tears. "Mrs. Williams, I am so sorry. What we said was horrible and wrong, and there's no excuse for it. You've been nothing but kind and welcoming, and we were just awful." I studied her face, looking for signs of genuine remorse versus damage control. What I saw was a young woman who seemed truly horrified by her own behavior, someone who was perhaps learning a valuable lesson about the consequences of casual cruelty. "Thank you for apologizing, Sarah," I said quietly. It takes courage to admit when you've been wrong. But Amanda was a different story entirely. I could see her mind working frantically, trying to calculate how to repair the damage she'd done. When she finally spoke, her words confirmed my worst suspicions about her character. "Mrs. Williams, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding," she said, her voice taking on a sickeningly sweet tone. "What you overheard, it wasn't about you personally. We were just discussing, the overall guest list and wondering if everyone felt comfortable. You know how these social situations can be complicated." The audacity of her attempt to gaslight me, to rewrite history even as the evidence of her cruelty hung in the air between us, was breathtaking. But it also provided me with the perfect opportunity to deliver the final blow. "Amanda," I said, my voice carrying the authority of someone who had dealt with far more sophisticated liars than her. "I'm 68 years old. I've survived poverty, discrimination, and loss. I've raised a family, built a successful life, and contributed to this community for over 4 decades. Do you really think I'm naive enough to fall for such an obvious lie?" The room was watching our exchange like spectators at a tennis match, heads turning back and forth as the confrontation escalated. I could see some guests beginning to edge toward the exit, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the celebration had taken. "The truth is," I continued, my voice growing stronger, "you said exactly what you meant. You looked at me and saw someone who didn't fit your narrow definition of who belongs in your social circle. You saw my skin color, heard my accent, noticed my modest dress, and decided I was somehow beneath you." I pulled out my phone again, scrolling to a different screen. "But here's what you didn't see. You didn't see the woman who has donated over $50,000 to Canadian charities over the past decade. You didn't see the volunteer who has spent countless hours helping new immigrants navigate the system I once struggled with myself. You didn't see the grandmother who has quietly supported not just her own family, but several other families in this community who were facing financial hardship." The photographer was still recording, his camera capturing every word, every expression, every moment of this unprecedented confrontation. I was glad. I wanted this documented, wanted there to be a record of what had happened here today. "And you certainly didn't see the woman who was planning to establish a scholarship fund at the University of Toronto for young Black women pursuing careers in healthcare. A fund that was going to be worth over $200,000. I let that number hang in the air for a moment, watching as its significance registered on the faces around me. Amanda's mouth had fallen open, her earlier attempts at damage control forgotten in the face of this new revelation. "Was going to be," I repeated, emphasizing the past tense, "because after today I'm reconsidering whether this community deserves that kind of investment from someone who apparently doesn't belong here." The silence that followed was different from before, heavier, more charged with the weight of consequences and regret. Several guests were now openly staring at Amanda with expressions of disgust and anger, clearly holding her responsible for what was unfolding. But I wasn't finished yet. The reckoning that had been building all afternoon was reaching its climax, and everyone in that room was about to learn exactly what it cost to underestimate a woman who had spent her entire life proving her worth to people who should have recognized it from the beginning. The confrontation reached its peak when Amanda, clearly desperate to salvage the situation, made the mistake of trying to turn the tables on me. Her voice took on a defensive edge as she addressed the room, apparently hoping to rally support from the other guests. "I think we're all getting a bit carried away here," she said, her tone suggesting that I was the one being unreasonable. "Mrs. Williams, I understand you're upset, but making threats about money and inheritances seems a bit extreme. We're all family here, and family should be able to work through misunderstandings without resorting to financial manipulation." The audacity of her words, calling my response to their cruelty financial manipulation, was the final straw. The careful control I'd maintained throughout this entire ordeal finally gave way to the righteous anger I'd been holding back. "Financial manipulation?" I repeated, my voice rising for the first time all afternoon. "You spend an entire party discussing how I don't belong at a celebration I paid for, and you have the nerve to accuse me of manipulation?" I stepped closer to her, my small frame somehow commanding the entire room's attention. "Let me tell you about manipulation, Amanda. Manipulation is accepting someone's generosity while simultaneously mocking them behind their back. Manipulation is enjoying the benefits of someone's sacrifice while questioning their right to be present for the celebration. Chloe moved to stand beside me, her voice shaking with emotion as she addressed Amanda directly. "How dare you? How dare you come into my grandmother's celebration? Yes, her celebration, because she made it possible, and treat her like she's somehow less than you." "Chloe, please," Amanda tried to interrupt, but my granddaughter was just getting started. "No, I won't be quiet about this. Grandma Dot has been the backbone of our family for as long as I can remember. She's the one who babysat me when my parents worked late. She's the one who helped pay for my education, my wedding, my first apartment. She's the one who's been there for every important moment of my life. And you treated her like garbage." The photographer had moved closer, his camera capturing every moment of this emotional confrontation. I could see other guests pulling out their phones, some recording, others probably texting frantically to friends and family about the drama unfolding at what was supposed to be a peaceful baby shower. "And you know what the worst part is?" Chloe continued, her voice breaking with tears and rage. "She would have forgiven you. She would have accepted your apology and moved on, because that's the kind of person she is. But instead, you tried to gaslight her, to make her think she misunderstood what she clearly heard." I reached out and took Chloe's hand, feeling a surge of pride at her fierce defense of me. This was the granddaughter I'd helped raise, the young woman who had learned from my example that standing up for what's right is more important than keeping the peace. "It's okay, sweetheart," I said gently. "I think everyone understands the situation now." But Amanda wasn't ready to give up. In a last desperate attempt to save face, she turned to the other guests with a pleading expression. "Surely you all understand that this has gotten completely out of hand. We're talking about a simple misunderstanding that's been blown completely out of proportion." The response she received was not what she was hoping for. Mrs. Chen, an elderly Chinese woman who had been quietly observing the entire confrontation, stood up from her chair with the dignity of someone who had faced her own share of discrimination over the years. "There was no misunderstanding," she said firmly, her accented English carrying the weight of absolute moral authority. "I heard what you said about Mrs. Williams. We all did. And what you said was cruel, ignorant, and completely unacceptable." One by one, other guests began to speak up. Sarah's mother, who had remained silent throughout the confrontation, addressed her daughter with obvious disappointment. "Sarah, I'm ashamed of you. Mrs. Williams has been nothing but gracious, and this is how you repay her kindness?" Even some of the younger guests, people I'd barely spoken to all afternoon, were now looking at Amanda with undisguised disgust. The social dynamics of the room had shifted completely, and she found herself isolated and condemned by the very people she'd been trying to impress. "I think," I said quietly, my voice cutting through the chaos with calm authority, "it's time for certain people to leave. This is supposed to be a celebration of new life, of family, of love. There's no room here for the kind of hatred and prejudice that some of you have brought into this space." I looked directly at Amanda, my gaze steady and unflinching. "You're no longer welcome at my granddaughter's celebration. Please collect your things and go." The silence that followed was absolute. Amanda's face cycled through shock, anger, and finally, grudging acceptance as she realized that her position was completely untenable. Without another word, she gathered her purse and jacket and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor in a rhythm that sounded like defeat. As the door closed behind her, the atmosphere in the room shifted dramatically. The tension that had been building all afternoon finally began to dissipate, replaced by something that felt like relief and, surprisingly, renewed celebration. What would you do in my place? Hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments. Because this grandmother isn't done showing people what real strength looks like. 3 months have passed since that unforgettable baby shower, and my life has changed in ways I never could have imagined. The video of my confrontation with Amanda, yes, someone did record it and share it online, went viral across Canada and beyond. I've received thousands of messages from people sharing their own stories of discrimination and family sacrifice, from grandmothers who recognize their own struggles in mine, from young people who were inspired by my refusal to accept disrespect. But the most important changes have been much closer to home. Chloe gave birth to a beautiful baby girl 6 weeks ago, little Emma Dorothy, named partly after me, which brought tears to my eyes when she told me. I was the first person she called when labor started, and I was there in the delivery room, holding her hand as she brought my great-granddaughter into the world. The joy on her face when she placed that tiny baby in my arms was worth every moment of pain I'd endured at that baby shower. "Grandma Dot," she whispered as I cradled Emma for the first time, "I want you to know that what happened at the shower changed everything for me." I realized I'd been so focused on fitting into this social circle that I'd lost sight of what really matters: family, respect, and the people who truly love us. The aftermath of that day had indeed changed everything. Amanda's behavior became the talk of Oakville's social circles, but not in the way she'd hoped. Word spread quickly about how she'd treated the grandmother who'd paid for the entire celebration, and the response was overwhelmingly negative. Several mutual friends cut ties with her entirely, and she eventually moved away from the area, apparently unable to face the social consequences of her actions. Sarah, to her credit, has made genuine efforts to make amends. She's visited me several times, bringing flowers and heartfelt apologies, and has even volunteered to help with the scholarship fund I eventually decided to establish. Her remorse seemed genuine, and I've chosen to forgive her, partly because everyone deserves a chance to learn from their mistakes, and partly because holding on to anger would only hurt me in the end. The scholarship fund itself has become something I'm incredibly proud of. The Dorothy Williams Scholarship for Excellence in Healthcare will provide financial support for young Black women pursuing careers in nursing and healthcare, fields where I spent much of my own working life. The response from the community has been overwhelming, with additional donations pouring in from people who were inspired by my story. My relationship with my family has also evolved in beautiful ways. Michelle, my daughter, was horrified when she learned what had happened at the baby shower. She'd been traveling for work and missed the event, but when Chloe told her the full story, she immediately drove to my apartment with tears in her eyes and a determination to make things right. "Mom," she said, holding me tight in my small living room, "I'm so sorry I wasn't there to protect you. I'm sorry I didn't realize how some of these people were treating you. That ends now, and it has ended. Michelle has made it clear to everyone in her social circle that disrespecting me means disrespecting her entire family. She's also insisted on taking a more active role in including me in family decisions and celebrations, making sure I'm not just invited but truly welcomed and valued. The financial security I mentioned at the baby shower has allowed me to make some changes in my own life as well. I've moved to a larger apartment in a building with other active seniors, where I've found a community of people who appreciate my stories and experiences. I've also started taking some classes at the local community college: art history and creative writing, things I never had time for when I was working multiple jobs to support my family. But perhaps the most meaningful change has been in how I see myself. For too many years, I allowed other people's opinions to make me feel small, to question my own worth and belonging. That day at the baby shower, when I finally stood up and demanded the respect I deserved, I reclaimed something I'd lost along the way: my own sense of dignity and self-worth. I still face moments of discrimination and prejudice. That's an unfortunate reality for many of us who don't fit society's narrow definitions of who belongs where. But now I respond differently. I speak up immediately, clearly, and without apology. I refuse to shrink myself to make others comfortable, and I refuse to accept crumbs of respect when I deserve the whole meal. Little Emma is sleeping in my arms as I write this, her tiny fingers wrapped around mine with the absolute trust that only babies possess. She'll grow up in a world that's still imperfect, still struggling with issues of race and belonging and respect. But she'll also grow up knowing that her great-grandmother was a woman who refused to be silenced, who stood up for herself and her family, who proved that it's never too late to demand the dignity you deserve. The old lady who didn't belong turned out to belong exactly where she was, at the center of a family that loves her, in a community that respects her, and in her own skin, which she's finally learned to wear with pride. And that, I've discovered, is the most beautiful kind of justice there is: the end.